Something unbelievable. I always thought it was a sin to teach a Maamar of the Rebbe without listening to the Rebbe say the Maamar. Because when you learn the Maamar yourself, look at the words the Rebbe uses in the print, not necessarily getting the energy of the Maamar, not necessarily getting when you see the Rebbe say a Maamar, you see how the Rebbe is giving his whole entire neshama in the Maamar. And you see where the Rebbe, sometimes the Rebbe gets very, very emotional about different parts of the Maamar that you never even think it's like a big deal. So I've been learning Basa Legani Maamarim since I'm in high school, and I was listening to the tape this morning of this Maamar, and I it's like blows my mind, and for good reason. In the next paragraph, that is going to discuss how we're learning the Maamar Basa Legani for the second time. What that means is, as we discussed, that every year the Rebbe explains a different chapter of Basa Legani, and so the Rebbe went through the Maamar for 20 years in Tafshil Lamed, and then Tafshil Lamed Aleph started again. Now we're learning chapter 12 of the Maamar for the second time. But the Rebbe says it this way. The previous Rebbe, the Rebbe, explains in the 12th chapter of the Maamar in the second time, the same way he explained it the first time. Do you hear? You hear what I'm hearing? The previous Rebbe is explaining the Maamar now again, the second time, and he's explaining it the same way he explained it the first time. Let me put this in Neanderthal words, okay? Like just bring it down a little bit. There's the Rebbe, and he's standing here, and he's repeating the Maamar again. The previous Rebbe is repeating the Maamar again, and now he's repeating chapter 12. And you don't know what he's going to say. You don't know what he's going to say. But he explains it the second time that we're going through the Maamar, the same way he explained it the first time. Is that novel to you? Doesn't sound novel to me, right? Okay, it's printed. No, that's not how the Rebbe learns the Maamar. The previous Rebbe is teaching the Maamar now, and he's teaching chapter 12 right now. And he happened to explain chapter 12 the second time, the same way he explained it the first time. No words. It's just a whole different thing. It's not like we're learning something the previous Rebbe said, and he said into motion that we should always learn it every year. The previous Rebbe explains now the Maamar the fourth time, going on the Maamar the fourth time now. And he's explaining it now the fourth time, the same way he explained it the first time. I don't know if you're getting the Gevald. The Gevald is, that's not an old Maamar in an old book, but the previous Rebbe is right now, the Rebbe is listening to Maamar from the previous Rebbe, and he's saying, he's just explained the Maamar now the same way he explained it the first time. One time, the Razah, the Rebbe Rashab's brother, was called by the Rebbe Rashab, and they went together to hear a Maamar from the Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe Marash had passed away long before. They went together to listen to their father from Gan Eden say a Maamar. And the Razah said, after hearing the Maamar from the Rebbe Marash, he said, an oil misher, someone who is from the world, which is a Chassidic euphemism in the Chassidic lexicon, it means somebody who is Chassidically challenged. An oil misher, someone who is from the world, someone who is Chassidically challenged, only believes in something he can count with his fingers. Only something he can count with his fingers, that's the only thing he can believe. In other words, what we just experienced is something like they will never get. So the previous Rebbe explains the Maamar the second time. The same explained the first time in chapter 12. Okay. Enough of my rant. The rant is over. But just like we should realize who we're dealing with and what's going on. There's a Maamar of Basa Legani, and not just a Maamar that was said a long time ago. It's the previous Rebbe is explaining it again. Now we're learning it the fourth, and the previous Rebbe is explaining it now the fourth time, the same way he's explaining it the first time. Okay, so I did some little false advertising yesterday. 2 days ago, I said I just want to explain the conclusion of the paragraph before. We began the Ois Gimel. So the conclusion of the previous paragraph, we said that the Hashem gives us the strength to win the war. That yes, there's the war, but as long as you bring out the essence of your neshama, it's certain you'll win the war. And the Rebbe says, what does winning the war mean? Winning the war means, like it says, God redeem my soul in peace. Not just we'll win with a fight, but we'll win in a way that there's in a peaceful way. As explained in other discourses, but that doesn't say here what that means, except he mentions that the true meaning of peace is that the darkness itself is transformed to light. So just one thought about what that means. The Mittler Rebbe explains that this verse, God redeem my soul in peace from those who war against me, those who fight against me. Mittler Rebbe explains that verse is talking about a revelation of Yechida. Every part of the soul has a parallel in the animal soul. Just like we could have obedience to Hashem, we could also have obedience to our neighbors and to society and to fashion and whatever. Chas v'shalom. Just like we could love Hashem, we could love the wrong things. But Yechida has no parallel. Yechida is a unique bond between the Jew and Hashem, and there's nothing that exists in the world that is similar to that. It's a bond we have with Hashem, and this is the part of us that, because this part of us, a Jew says, I do not want and I cannot sever my bond with Hashem. I can't. It's impossible. That's what Yechida is. So if Yechida is revealed, it would seem that there's no war in the first place. But the verse says, God redeem my soul in peace. It means there's a redemption from something that you're fighting with. So the Mittler Rebbe says that basically, the Rebbe explains it, what the Mittler Rebbe is saying, that even if you don't have revelation of your Yechida, you have a revelation in the language of today's Hayom Yom, your animal soul is completely contracting your godly soul. Your godly soul is not expressing itself at all. It's somewhere deep in the deeper recesses of your mind, in some filing cabinet, in some dusty filing cabinet in your brain, there's a godly soul, and it's not really trickling into your persona, into your thoughts, into your feelings. But nevertheless, if you think about how you're a Jew and you have a Yechida, and that's who you really are, so that allows you to overcome all challenges, because realizing that you're ready to give your life rather than sever your bond with Hashem, realizing that that's who you are, that puts the playing field of the different things that are in front of you and allows you to really to put them aside and to realize in the language of the Mizitcha Maggid. Mizitcha Maggid famously was once visited by someone who stayed the night, who was giving him a message of the Baal Shem Tov, and famously he asked the Mizitcha Maggid, how could you live in such dire poverty? And the Maggid said, you stayed here too. How could you live in such dire poverty? And the guy's like, dude, I only was here for one night. How could you live here for your whole life in such poverty? So the Maggid responded, I'm also just passing through. This is not the forever thing. So thinking about that, you have a connection with Hashem. That's your forever thing. That's who you are. That's just your heart. That's the strength of your heart. that's who you are. That allows you to overcome the various different challenges. That's how you summon the essence of your neshama to be redeemed in peace, although there was a war, and there is a war, and your neshama is not shining so much. But thinking about the Hav Yechid, that allows you to be redeemed in peace. But the ultimate redemption in peace is that when Yechid is really revealed, not just you think about it, but it's become something that you feel, and it's revealed in you. So that causes the animal soul itself to be transformed. It causes the negativity inside of you to be transformed. As the Rebbe Rashab writes in Kuntres Aveda, that when a person goes through a challenge of Mesiras Nefesh, if a person goes through a situation where he's required, and he does, accept to die al Kiddush Hashem, even though he doesn't have to actually die al Kiddush Hashem. Like think about the Jewish people in time of Purim, where they were ready to die, but they didn't have to, and Baruch Hashem, they didn't have to die. So going through that experience itself, that itself transforms your whole persona, transforms your entire animal soul. So the revelation of Yechida causes a redemption and peace, that the negative becomes good. Like the Alter Rebbe says, the only way to reach Pnimius, only way to make something real inside yourself is through Mesiras Nefesh, through sacrifice. So that's perhaps one of the ideas that Rebbe is referring to when he says that we should reach redemption and peace. The negative itself is transformed to good. Okay, so continuing on, I just wanted to show one more thing I saw this morning before we go on. In the bracha that the Rebbe gives for the Farbrengens in Tavshin Chav Beis, which that was the first year that the previous Rebbe explained the Maamar of this 12th chapter, Basel Lagani. In that telegram, the Rebbe gives a blessing for the Farbrengen. Listen, it's relevant to what we're going to learn. There should be a Svadus Pe'ila. Svadus Pe'ila means there should be a Farbrengen that has an effect, that has impact, an impactful Farbrengen, and to use as much as you can, as much as the way it's supposed to be, the treasures, the good treasures that are being given to us freely. As we're learning now in the discourse, it says that before, in order to win the war, Hashem gives us the treasure houses. So it says that the Farbrengen should be in a way that we use out those incredible treasures of revelation, of godliness that Hashem pours on us at this time to win the war, and with a blessing for success. That's the telegram. Okay, so we started yesterday discussing how the meaning of these treasures that God gives us, and we learned so far, I didn't read it inside yet, was that Hashem's infinite light is l'mayla din kates l'mata din tachlis. It's high without any limit, and it's low without any limit. That's the treasure house. In Shemayim, the treasure house means Hashem's infinite expression, infinite revelation in two ways, as we learned yesterday, l'mayla din kates l'mata din tachlis. High in the highest worlds and beyond the highest worlds, the revelation, how everything before Hashem is like nothing. And then there's another revelation, Hashem creates the lowest kinds of reality in this world. And despite the fact that there's a contraction and God's light is hidden, still it's apparent that the light hasn't lost its infinity. It still stays infinite, even as it's in this world. There's one more thought before we continue on. You know how on the dollar it says "E pluribus unum"? They pronounce that right, Yonatan? "E pluribus unum", out of many one. So as Rebbe once said, that the reason why dollar says that is because the dollar has two possible things the dollar can mess you up in. It can make you lose your faith in God and can cause you to fight with people. Therefore, the Rebbe says the dollar has on it two reminders that in God we trust, and that on the contrary, pluribus unum. But for our discourse over here, another point, which is the opposite. I don't know how to say it in Latin, but it's how from unum comes pluribus. That's specifically something which has no definition, something which is infinite. That's what's able to create a multitude of things. If something if something has some kind of parameter, some kind of definition, some kind of limitation, it can't produce an infinite amount of things. In order to produce an infinite amount of different kinds of things, there has to be it has to come from one. It has to come from something which is completely simple, which has no definition at all. And that unum, that thing which has no definition at all, it's not divided, it's not compartmentalized at all, it's just one, it's just simplicity. That's what's able to produce the multiplicity of all different kinds of creatures, an infinite amount of creatures. So in explaining the treasure house that's given to us in this world, David discusses how things are in Shemayim. Let's continue and read the Maamar on. We are now on page 27, Ois Dalet. Umam Shochavayr Perek Yud Beis Mechuv Lashon Zu Shnasi Beis Pamashnia Shebachol Sam Shechei Shesem Prakim Perek Echel Chol Shana LaAchrei Esem Shana Maschil Mashon Prakim Mashon Pamashnia. This 12th chapter, the discourse, has a relevance to this year because there are 20 chapters, and therefore this year, 1982, we are learning this discourse the second time. You see how much is lost in the way it's printed? Just again, advertisement. You have to listen to the way the Rebbe says the Maamar to really get what's going on. Okay. The previous Rebbe explained the second time the same way he explained the first time. Okay, keep on going. Shleimar is that when in Beis Chafim. The idea of reading the Maamar the second time, going through the Maamar the second time, is related to two chafs. What's two chafs? Oisis kfulis hashayich mina geula. Chaf is numerical equivalent to 20. So Beis Chafim is the idea of 22 20s. But it says that whenever you have two of the same letters, there are 5 letters in the alphabet which have a in the language of preschool, they have a sister letter. The Chaf and Tzadik and Taf and Shin and Mem, they all have a sister letter. They have a Mem Sofit and a final Tzadik, etc. So it says in the Medrash, Abel Lezer says that the double letters have relationship to Geula, to Mashiach. How do double letters have a relationship to redemption? So the Medrash says that when Avram was stuck in Ur Kasdim in his dad's house, how was he freed from that place of idol worship? God told him, Lech Lecha. So there was a double expression, Lech Lecha. Two words that started with a lamed. When the Jewish people were in Egypt, Hashem told them, Pocket Pakarti, I will remember you. A double expression with, again, 2 pays. And when Mashiach comes, it says double expression of the letter Tzadik. It says, Ish Tzemach Shmoi Mitachtav Yitzmach. A man whose name is Tzemach, and from him there'll be Yitzmach, there'll be growth. So that double expression of Tzaddik is a reference to Mashiach Tzadkein. So the double, learning the Maamar the second time, is connected to Geula, connected to Mashiach. The Inyan Yitzhak Shamayla, you say the Maamar Tekunizayer and Tach Mailan and Ketzamata and Tachas. So in order to explain what we're given here in this world, the previous Rebbe explains what the treasure house is of Hashem, how the infinite light of Hashem is high without any limit and descends low without any limit as well. Elish will they levar good on the mile and the itzer mevar tkala good on mile of ilish bein mat and tachas they mekosh kana ilish bein mile and hadin ketsim showing it. In order to explain how the light of Hashem really is high without any limit, to explain the magnitude of that statement, how Hashem's light is set, it goes higher and higher without any limit. To explain that, the previous Rebbe first introduces how the light of Hashem descends. And that will teach us, that'll give us some insight, that will be, so to speak, a pedestal to explain the first half of the statement, how the infinite light of Hashem ascends and goes higher and higher without any limit. So first we're going to look at how the way the light of Hashem descends in the world, and that will give us some insight to Hashem's infinite light as it is in the higher worlds and how it is in the deepest and highest levels of revelation. And that will give us some insight as well. The point is that we should realize how much God is giving us. Okay. Next page Chav Ches. So the previous Rebbe explains that the meaning of the words Or Ein Sof, the light that has no end. What does that word mean? You might think that means there is God, and God is infinite, and this is a light that comes from God. Ein Sof, this is a light of God. I think the previous Rebbe writes, I don't want to misquote, but something like there was a chassid of his who had like 20 different parables. The previous Rebbe was explaining the brilliance of this chassid of the Rebbe Rashab. I don't remember how many parables. There are like 20 parables to explain the difference between the words Ein Sof and Ha Ein Sof, the infinite light of Hashem and the light of the infinite one. But I don't have 20 parables. All I have is the words over here. The infinite light of Hashem means that the light itself is infinite. It doesn't mean it comes from an infinite source. It means the light itself is infinite. It doesn't mean the light that comes from God who is infinite. Rather, the adjective infinite is a reference to the light itself. The light itself is infinite. Not that it comes from the infinite one, but the light itself is infinite. The Tamadavar who, why is this light infinite? Lefi sha'eru mein amor. Elsewhere, Chassidus asks, it would seem that everything that has a beginning has limitation. If it has no beginning, so then it doesn't have a limitation. So regarding God himself, who has no beginning, who has no source, so we could say that his light is infinite. But this is a light that comes from God. Why is it infinite? It has a beginning. It comes from God, and therefore it has a beginning. So why does it have no end? So the answer is that the light of Hashem is similar. It is attached to Hashem. It has dveikus to Hashem, and therefore it's similar to Hashem. Although it's a ray of godliness, it's not the essence. It's only a ray. But since it is attached to Hashem, it has similar properties, if you will, to God Himself. And therefore, just like Hashem is infinite, so the light of Hashem, the revelation of Hashem is also infinite. Although it's only a ray of godliness, it's not the essence. However, this is its virtue, that it's similar to the luminary, it's similar to its source. And since the luminary, since Hashem's essence has no limitation and has no definition, when we talk about infinity can be translated in many different ways. You could, for example, Rabbi Elkan was very, very funny how he spoke. He was once at a Fabrengen, and he says, let me give you a very coarse example, a very low, simple example, just so you understand what I'm talking about. Atzilus, that was his low, coarse example. Simple example, Atzilus. In Atzilus, there's infinity. How is there infinity in Atzilus? There's tested as infinity. So there's also infinity. We talk about the infinite light of Hashem, and the infinity as we talk about the essence of Hashem. So Hashem Himself is beyond the limitations, the parameters of beginning and end in the first place. You can't say Hashem that He has no end or no beginning, because that itself is putting Him in the category. Chassidus talks about understanding what something is and understanding what something isn't. That there are some things that we could use adjectives to describe what something is, and some things we don't know what those things are. We don't know what we're describing. We know it's not the opposite of that. For example, we talk about God's wisdom. We don't know what God's wisdom is. No, it's not the opposite of wisdom. So we say that Hashem Himself has no beginning or end. Those are not the right adjectives, because Hashem is the whole parameter of beginning and end. It's similar to the Alter Rebbe Tanya. If someone says, I cannot touch an idea, the sense of touch and ideas are two different realms completely. So it doesn't make sense to the words I can't touch an idea. Similar way to say Hashem is beyond beginning and beyond that, it's not a pedestal that describes gets us any closer to God's essence. He's beyond those parameters. Okay, so because Hashem, however, that's a fact, He is beyond the parameters of beginning and end. Therefore, the light which comes from Hashem is also in. That's the meaning of Ur Ein Sof. Again, not the light that comes from God, the light of the Ein Sof, light of the infinite one, rather the light itself, the revelation of Hashem, that ray of godliness emerges from Hashem's essence. This tiny ray of godliness is also infinite. What does it mean when we say that Hashem's infinite light extends without any limit? What does that mean? That even the way it extends goes lower and lower, it still remains infinite. Although there has to be a tzimtzum to produce the existence of the world, yet even the way the light of Hashem descends into this world, it still remains infinite. And it has to, in order to create all the multiplicity creation. So, although there has to be a tzimtzum, but despite it has to be a tzimtzum, it still remains infinite. As we learned yesterday, the effect of the tzimtzum, as it says in the note over here, the effect of the tzimtzum on Hashem's limited light was in the effect of Hashem's tzimtzum and Hashem's infinite light. On the infinite light of Hashem, both lights existed before the tzimtzum. Just briefly recap one sentence we learned yesterday. The infinite light of Hashem, it, so to speak, departed. Again, doesn't mean really departed, chas v'shalom, but it became completely hidden. The limited light of Hashem, the effect of the tzimtzum on the limited light of Hashem was already limited before the tzimtzum. So it didn't need to depart. It was already measured. It was already meant to illuminate and create the spiritual cosmos and the physical cosmos post tzimtzum. The the point of its symptom on that limited light was just to further crystallize and make it more make it even more to diminish it somewhat. It didn't have to be removed, didn't have to be concealed completely, just needed to be hidden somewhat. So despite its symptoms effect on that light, and because of that, it's now possible to make a reality that feels itself to be outside, to speak of godliness, and to descend and descend all the way down to create the multiplicity of creation in this world. Despite the fact that light of Hashem descends so much, don't think it's lost its infinity. It remains infinity. It still remains infinite, rather, even as after it descends here. As the previous Rebbe explains in the Maamar the details of what that means, and adds a point. It's not only that it remains infinite, as in the world, or more. The true expression of Hashem's infinity is only in this world. It's specifically in this world, through our mitzvahs and our Aveda, in the post-Tzimtzum reality, in the physical world. There's no world in this world. Only this world can become the garden of God's essence, which is higher than the infinite light of Hashem. The infinite light of Hashem is a great revelation. It's nice. But where can you make home God's essence himself? It's specifically in post-Tzimtzum reality. So not only although we're saying that like it's contracted, etc., but it's dafkin out in this world where we're able to do something beyond the light of Hashem. And the general idea is like this. As Arizal writes in the Eitz Chaim, in the Eretz Chaim, in the beginning, there was the infinite light of Hashem filling all of existence, says Arizal. And there needed to be a tzimtzum to create a space for creation. And then a goddess emerged from the tzimtzum. And now is this reality of all the entire spiritual cosmos until this physical world. And it's specifically in this physical world able to create this home for Hashem, home for God's essence. So although there's a contraction, etc., but it's specifically here, because of the contraction, they're able to do something beyond Ir Ein Sof. It's interesting. The Chassidim that I was before, they're just trying to figure out the difference between Ir Ein Sof and Ir Ha-Ein Sof. And to us, Rebbe says, that's small change. You got to focus what you're doing. What you're doing is more than Ein Sof. It's Atzmus. You bring it home for God's essence. Anyways, L'chaim L'vrach, any questions or comments? A great day to Breast, great day David, great day Jonathan, great day Blake.
Thanks.